Okay, hi BookTube, Aaron here, hope you're doing okay. Today I've got a tag for you. I'm going to be doing the Historathon book tag part 1, I suppose, Ancient Cultures. This is a tag by Jack, the Rambling Raconteur, and it's to go along with Historathon. So that's a reading event going on this year, just to get people reading a bit more history. And this is, just using a whole load of ancient cultures to talk about reading and your reading life. So let's jump into it. So the first prompt here is the Romans. What books or writers or genres are your bread and circus? And I've just got a few books here to show you what books in general fall into which. So for the bread, the books that sustain you, and then circus, books that entertain you. So on the bread side, these books tend to be a little more cerebral. They're not as immediately accessible, and yet they stay with you, and you spend time mulling them over even after you've finished them. And I've got examples in poetry and in prose. So so my bread poetry book is 4 Quartets by T.S. Eliot. It's really profoundly beautiful, this poem, I think, and I think it's the best thing that T.S. Eliot wrote. But it doesn't make immediate sense, at least not to me. But it's a really, really wonderful book. And again, sort of very similar, a kind of direct equivalent. I think for prose would be In Memory of Memory by Maria Stepanova. And she's tying these essays about all these disparate subjects, and sort of family letters, conversations, memories. It's kind of all together into a kind of a family history or a cultural history, but it's not tied together very tightly, and you're still trying to work out exactly how it all fits together. I really love that book. Maybe I should read 4 Quartets and In Memory of Memory together at the same time and just see what it's like. But then for the circus side of things, so books that entertain you, so these are books that are kind of like water slides, where you're not completely turning your brain off, but you're just kind of jumping in and seeing what happens. So on the poetry side, some surrealist poems. I love this little selection of surrealist poetry in English. And it's like a water slide. It's just image upon image and upon image, and you don't know where you're going to end up. But it's just a lot of fun, at least for me. I just find it's, you're not completely turning your brain off, but you're trying not to be too self-aware, and you're trying not to see how clever the poet's being. You're just going along with it, really. Then in prose, something like The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. So it is a kind of a mystery novel, a sensation novel. It's a bit gothic, and it's got this convoluted plot, but it just keeps going and going and going, and it's a bit of a page turner, and you get really, really invested. And both sides, the bread and the circus side, I really, really love. And for me, a lot of what I read tends to actually fall somewhere between them. That they don't, and not so clearly, books that entertain me or sustain me. Usually they're doing a bit of both. And a book that really falls into that middle ground really, really well would be something like The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco. It is kind of a murder mystery. There are also some more cerebral aspects going on there. But at the end of the day, it's just a great place to be. I just love the setting of this book, the world of this book, the conversations that take place. It gets you thinking about things that you probably wouldn't normally think about. And so I just love what it does and what it's like to be in this book. Number 2, I promise I won't have loads and loads of books for every single prompt. Number 2 is The Sumerians. So what is a book you read many years ago that you still appreciate? I didn't read this years and years and years ago. It was probably about a decade ago, I think. And it's Birthday Letters by Ted Hughes. And when I read this, I was sort of kind of into reading poetry. I'd sort of engaged a bit with some Elizabethan stuff and with the Romantics. I think sort of Shelley and Blake in particular kind of stood out to me. But this was, it kind of felt more personal. Once I got it, it kind of felt like finally poetry was something that was for me, and kind of by extension literature in general it wasn't something that was aloof and just for experts. It's something that anyone can enjoy. And so yeah, this was a book that it was just kind of an epiphany, just a moment where things lined up and I realised that this is something that I really, really love doing. Then next up is the Shang. So what is your favourite non-example to pillory? So I've got a book here that, at least for me, symbolises lots of things that I just don't like in literature, but in sort of other areas, other art forms as well. And it's Philip Larkin. I've just got his collected poems here. And for me, it just kind of represents this kind of mood and this feeling in sort of mid to late 20th century sort of British stuff. I suppose part of it is this kind of kitchen sink kind of drama feeling that I think Larkin kind of communicates quite well. And I just don't particularly like that. I don't know, it just makes me feel a bit weird. And I don't know, there's just a feeling there that I don't like. And there are a few films, a few TV shows, a few sort of plays, pieces of art that give me the same feeling, and it's hard to articulate exactly what it is. But for me, Larkin represents that for me. And the thing that's really, really annoying is that every now and then I come across a Larkin poem that's amazing, and it's really, really annoying that a poet that probably 9 times out of 10 I really don't like, I just find a bit annoying, then just writes an amazingly beautiful poem. So it's doubly annoying, I suppose. Number 4, early Basketmaker. So name an early work that points the way to later monuments. I've got here just the complete stories of Franz Kafka, and in particular in my head I was thinking of the short story The Judgments, which is, to kind of spoil the story, essentially about a son who kind of looks after his father, only for his father to sentence him to death. There's kind of more to it than that, really, but it's kind of quintessential Kafka. It's one of the handful of short stories that was published when he was alive, and so for me that kind of represents, I'm sure people read it and recognise just how good and amazing and weird Kafka is. But I think when he was alive, he was nowhere near the monumental figure that he is in world literature now. Now that we've got all of the stories and the novels, and then there's all this stuff that just hasn't been published yet, that I think, there are still court cases going on because people are arguing over how it should be released and who should own it and all of that stuff. So, but for me, those handful of stories that he published when he was still alive, they were just kind of just the first steps, the first kind of stirrings of a figure that, I don't know, he's like a cornerstone of 20th century literature, or I think in literature in general. Anyway, next up, number 5, the Babylonians. What book did you expect to be impenetrable, but found quite easy to sink into? So I'm not saying that this book is quite easy, but I found it quite easy to sink into it, which is, a different thing, I suppose. And I've got Ulysses by James Joyce, which is just one of those big books that just has a reputation for being hard. But I found it really entertaining, really funny, I didn't get it. I've only read it once, and I was just reading it through without any supplementary material, just to see what it was like. So I, probably have only scratched the surface. I definitely didn't get it, but I enjoyed it, and there was stuff that I thought was beautiful, stuff I thought was really weird, stuff that I thought was funny. But the experience of reading it, I thought it was great, and I really did feel like I sank into this book. But I think I can sink a lot deeper. Then next up, number 6, the Persians. How do you organise your bookshelves? Well, I'll show you. Okay, so here are the books, and as you can see on this shelf, for at least a large part of it, quite a lot of it is arranged by publishers. We've got loads of Black Spine Penguin classics there. Some sort of miscellaneous penguins. There's the Red Spine vintages and the Oxford World Classics down there. And then there's a bit of a mix of stuff back down here. That's mainly by genre. There's some science fiction and fantasy there. And at the bottom, they're mainly collected works and things like that, and a bit of poetry, some poetry anthologies, although most of the poetry is all together upstairs. Around the other side, as you can see, there's loads of modern classics there. There are some by author there. Then from then on, it is just general fiction, and then non-fiction at the bottom, just arranged alphabetically by the surname of the author. And then over on this other bookcase, we've got mainly mythology on the top. This is where I'm up to with my bookshelf tour at the moment. Then we've got some mystery in the middle, and then we've got some children's literature at the bottom. So it's kind of a divine comedy type deal. We've got hell at the bottom, we've got purgatory, and then paradise. Then number 7, the Ishango bone of the Middle Stone Age, Central Africa. How does the length of a work affect your reading experience? And this is an interesting one. I think I try to read a mix. I try to have books of different lengths going at the same time, just so that I could be reading through the shorter books and kind of feeling that momentum of having finished a book and moving to something else. But I do really love having a really, really big book and sinking into it, and just seeing what's in there and mulling it over and just taking my time with it. And so I think in the long run, I tend to get much more satisfaction out of a longer book, but it's not always the case. But many of the longer books I read, I tend to get just much more out of it, generally because I spend more time with them, I think. However, I've got sort of 3 books here of varying length, and I was reading them around the same time. So there's The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann, and it's a big chunky book that I just spent my time with. Spent quite a while in there and was just quite happy to take my time. But around the same time, I read A Chess Story by Stefan Zweig, which for me is just an ideal length story, and it feels wonderfully compressed. It's not too long, it's not too short, it feels complete, and it's saying what it has to say, and it's just doing it in just the right way. For me, it's a perfect story. And I'd say something similar for Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf, which again I read at the same time. I think these were both 2 short books that I was reading around the same time as The Magic Mountain, to kind of feel like I was getting that momentum and just reading something slightly different. And I think I read this in 2 sittings, and again, she's not saying more than she needs to say in this book. It's just the perfect length for what it is. And so, I got probably a similar amount of satisfaction out of each of these books. I just like to have different books of different sizes going at the same time. If that makes any sense, I'm not sure if I've just muddied the waters there, but I don't know. I'll end that prompt with that. I don't know. I just like them all. Then number 8, the Huns. How do you read or pack your books while travelling? I read primarily paper books. One of the last times I went, like on a holiday, I did bring my Kindle with me, and it ended up getting buried at the bottom of my bag. So that didn't go too well. And I had a couple of paper books with me that time, so I just gravitated towards them. I think if I got into a bit more of a habit with my Kindle, then I would use it much more, particularly when travelling. However, at the moment, I just tend to, it's just part of my packing. I need to make sure I've got room for books, and maybe a little more room if I find any books while I'm travelling. Number 9, the Aurignacian, the Aurignacian culture. What are your favourite pop culture references to ancient cultures? And this was actually quite hard for me, because there are a few that came to mind, but they really just came to mind because they were quite distinct, and so I didn't really want to go for them because it felt quite lazy. I wanted to go for one that felt like a favourite, and all I could really think of was the lyric in at the end of Revolver. My advice for those who died, declare the pennies on your eyes, which is, kind of engaging with ancient culture in a very fun, tongue-in-cheek way. And yeah, that's probably one of my favourite lyrics from any song ever. So that'll be my number 9. Beatles pun, non-intended. Then number 10, the Minoans. So establish some trade routes and tag some booktubers. So I've got 3 people I would like to tag. I will tag David Wiley, because I don't think David's done this yet, and I think he'll quite enjoy it. And then I'll tag a couple of people that I'm going to be reading with in February. So I'll tag Alan from Big Hard Books and Classics, and Flo from Grape Jelly Library. They're both reading the Luminaries with me in February. And Flo is a sort of a new booktuber to me. I only found her because she wanted to join in, and we've made a little group. And so, yeah, a new booktuber. So as a kind of greeting, I'm going to tag you too, Flo. But there we go. That's the end of the tag. Sorry if this was a bit of a weird and rambly one. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. See you soon.